Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hope you're having an amazing day. We are getting very close now to not only AMD releasing the RDNA 4 GPUs, which of course is going to be happening at CES. We've got Nvidia waiting in the wings with Blackwell, but also Intel seem very close to formally announcing and releasing their Battlemage range of GPUs. And that's what I want to focus on primarily for this video, because there have been some very interesting updates that have been swirling around the internet, as well as some of my sources. So we're going to start things out with a quick thing for Amazon, actually, because they've kind of done an oopsie by pretty much listing several Battlemage GPUs, which actually confirm some of the specifications. Then we're going to move on to some performance updates, and then we're going to move on to some pretty concerning news that some of the higher end variants may have actually been cancelled. So let's start things out with Amazon, shall we? Again, this has been a bit of an oopsie, and I initially spotted this on Hardware Lux. Of course, I will leave a link to that article in the video description. But basically speaking, not all of the GPU specifications have been confirmed. What we are looking at here are various B580 GPUs. And unfortunately, once again, the number of XE cores isn't specified, but I have spoken about the specifications of these cards a number of times before, and ultimately speaking, I do think that the GPU is probably right, you know, the specifications that have leaked, particularly when you add in the fact that Amazon have essentially confirmed that we're looking at 12 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory on a 192-bit bus. With the cards that are listed here anyway, the memory speed is 19 Gbps, and we also have a PCIe 5.0, but unfortunately it's only an X8 slot. Now, don't get me wrong, that is absolutely fine if you have a motherboard that also supports the standard, because again, these are cards that are not exactly going to be competing with, let's say, an RTX 5080 or something like that. So you're going to be absolutely fine for memory bandwidth. The problem is going to start to perhaps rear its head if you're running a motherboard that's older, like PCIe 3, for example. That could cause an issue just in terms of memory bandwidth, because again, it's only an X8 slot. But as always with this stuff, we'll have to start, you know, doing testing and see just, you know, where the chips may fall, if you excuse the expression. So there are a couple of cards here that have been shown off, and basically they seem to be ASRock GPUs. Now, there are two that really give us a great insight actually into the graphics cards standards, because the first one is basically the Steel Legend, and here we have two 8-pin power connectors. Now, the 8-pin power connector, for those who don't know, is 150 watts that it can deliver, so you multiply that, of course, by 2, so that gives you a grand total of 300 watts, and then you have, of course, 75 watts, which can be pulled from the PCIe slot on your motherboard, so you're looking at around just under 400 watts, 375. Now, that's way above what we expect these cards to actually gobble up. And there's another model here which only has one of these 8-pin power connectors, and again you have the 8-pin power connector, which is 150 watts plus the 75 watts is 225. Honestly, I think that's probably going to be more than enough. It's going to be very interesting, however, to see how the wattage scales when you start overclocking these things. Unfortunately, we don't really have that information yet, or the actual overclock ability of the GPUs in general. So it'll be interesting, but again, I don't really expect these things to be pulling down like 400 watts, even if they are significantly overclocked. However, as always with these things, famous last words, and for all we know, if you start ramping the frequency up, it's going to start to, like, you know, trip power breakers or something like that. For reference, recently I did leak the performance and power specifications of these cards, and I said that G21 is going to be roughly on the line of an RTX 4060 Ti, roughly speaking anyway, perhaps a little bit slower, and I've since had a source actually that's confirmed this again. So I've now had 2 to 3 sources that have told me it's going to be up to around a 4060 Ti in raster, potentially a little bit less, so you can kind of guesstimate where that's going to lie in terms of you know, kind of benchmarks. You can basically say it's going to be equal to or perhaps around 10% slower, but as always with these things, it's going to depend on things like game engine, driver optimization, yada yada yada. And I was also told, at least by that source, that it's 130 watts plus. However, the key here is the plus 130 watts seems to be the minimum, so it may be a cut down variant of G21, not the B580. Furthermore, G31, I've got further confirmation it's going to be just a little bit under the 4070 Super, around that kind of level though, certainly not significantly slower, but a little bit slower than the 4070 Super. And again, this is information I released a couple of days ago, 16 gigabytes of memory, and again 225 watts plus. Obviously, once again, if you start going with the factory overclocked models, you can start imagining them going to suck down more juice. Now this is where I want to kind of unfortunately it's going to be the shin kick. I'm hearing some very mixed information that G31 may be cancelled. So what I have learned from multiple people is that yes, it seems that the 580s, for example, will basically be launching this year. Not only does it seem pretty damn obvious, given the fact that we've seen tons of Amazon, tons of stuff from Amazon, tons of shipping manifests and so on and so forth, but my sources are now telling me that yes, late December, most likely you will be able to buy this. So at the latest, late December, assuming nothing falls off. But G31 is becoming a mystery. We'll get to some shipping manifests that show that this card does exist in just a second to kind of provide some counter information to what I'm about to say. However, I've now had 2 to 3 sources tell me that they are growing increasingly concerned that G31 is canned. Now it's basically in this category of the sources are not 100% certain. They are leaning towards it being canned, or if it is not canned, it is going to launch probably Q1 late. And that's obviously next year. Just, for clarification, that's going to be 2025 if you're watching this video in a few years' time. Although I don't know why, it's a news video, but that's beside the point. So I'm really hoping that this is not the case because, quite frankly, I've been huffing a crap ton of copium that Intel will get its act together and actually release a product which is going to be competing with the mid-range. Well, I mean, technically speaking, it's not going to be the mid-range, I guess, of Battlemage. It's going to be competing against the mid-range of Battlemage. That's an interesting one. But yeah, it's not going to be competing with Blackwell's mid-range, but it's still going to be a tantalizing option for a lot of consumers, especially if you once again factor in RDNA 4, because one of the problems I have with Blackwell, and I mentioned this in a video, I think it was like 2 days ago, was that basically there's just not enough VRAM on a lot of NVIDIA's cards, at least in my personal opinion. You guys seem to feel the same way. I know, like, you can make some arguments, although frankly, I'm not 100% for it, of the 5080 having enough VRAM at 16 gigabytes. I still think that should be more. I still feel that that should be 20 gigabytes minimum, but I don't know. You can at least somewhat write it off. Like, personally, I don't think it's enough, but I could understand some people saying, to keep costs down. Let's face it, I'm sure NVIDIA are going to keep the costs down, right? Right? Anyway, but the mid-range or lower cards, if they've got like 12 or 8 gigs like that's not cool, dude. So, I'm really hoping that Battlemage as well as RDNA 4 offer that, but like I said, I'm hearing it may well be cancelled. I'm very much hopeful that this is not the case, and there is some counter evidence to show that potentially this is not true. I'm probably about to absolutely murder this person's name, so I'm really sorry, but Thomas, hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. I'm really sorry if I didn't. They are basically showing G31, as there's actually further discussions about G31 being cancelled on Twitter as well, and they are showing shipping manifests of G31 kind of in transit. So it's interesting because there are murmurs that G31 is cancelled online. I'm hearing that it's probably cancelled from my sources, but there is shipping manifests that basically show that at the very least prototype boards and stuff is going around which feature these GPUs. On the other hand, it's possible that it was a very limited production run, or Intel are not deciding what's going on. I honestly don't know. And what makes it more frustrating is I've still got one person telling me that it is not cancelled, and also the folks that I have asked about whether it's cancelled, they are just telling me they don't know why Intel would have cancelled it. Perhaps it's got something to do with the fact that they couldn't bring the prices down enough. Maybe they didn't think it was going to be competitive enough in the market. I honestly don't know. Maybe they're just delaying it, and so it seems like it's cancelled. It's going to be very interesting, though, whether it is or not. Again, I'm very hopeful that this information is incorrect. I truly do want Intel to release it, simply because I want as much competition in the marketplace as absolutely possible. Because I'm of the mindset that the more competition and the more companies that are like vying for our dollars, it just helps us in the long run. Because, you know, ultimately, if there's only one vendor, that sucks ass. And that's actually one of the reasons that, or perhaps the primary reason, I'm quite sad that AMD cancelled the high-end RDNA 4 variants, because again, it would mean if AMD did have a card that even competed only with the RTX 5080, at very least it would be more motivation for Nvidia to somewhat be better at keeping the prices and also the inventory and supply higher. But we'll have to wait and see on this one, guys, obviously. One final small piece of news that I do want to cover, and it concerns the Ryzen 9950X3D and the 9950X3D. A very well-known leaker on Twitter, Huang, hopefully, again, I've pronounced that correctly, I get the feeling I probably haven't, has confirmed that the 16 and 12 core X3D variants are going to be available on store shelves late January. Now, this is pretty expected because CES was allegedly the announcement date for quite some time at this point for the higher core count variants, so I don't think many of us expected to be waiting until, I don't know, like June or something for these to become available. But there is also confirmation that in terms of the V-cache, well, basically there's been a lot of hopium that we would basically see not one, but two of these CCDs, or both of the CCDs, should I say, benefiting from the V-cache. And at least according to the information that's here, that's not going to be the case. So it's going to essentially be the same as the, let's say, the Ryzen 7000 series. So it's going to be obviously too early to predict 100% about the gaming performance, but it basically is probably going to be still largely the same thing of like, if you're a gamer, you're probably only going to want 8 cores, so, you know, the current X3D is probably the best option. If you're a content creator, it would have been really cool to have seen what would have happened if you did have that V-cache across, did I say cache? Or crash, I'm not sure. Anyway, it would be quite nice to have the V-cache across all of the cores, but it doesn't look like it's happening. With that said, guys, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.